Remember a few weeks back, I had the awesome privilege of speaking to you all, and I challenged you all to jump in. Remember that? Well, I have just the opportunities for you to jump in. The biggest thing, I mentioned it briefly a few weeks ago. We're going to have a Christmas musical. It's going to be in the form of like a dessert theater. It's going to take place December 9th. And this is going to be a big deal. And this is going to be like all hands on deck for this thing. It's going to be involving our children and our teens. I need actually a couple adults to act. So I'm looking at you, Scott. We need everybody from helping with the music to the drama to helping with stage and set building, costumes, desserts, all that stuff. So this is going to be an all hands on deck event that's going to be, I think it's going to be phenomenal, and it'll bring our church together and we'll have fun together. So there's a sign-up sheet in the back. If you want to, your child would like to participate, sign them up. If you would like to help out, indicate that on there as well. Also, we are going to be having an all-nighter on the 14th of September. And now that I'm 40, the thought of an all-nighter with a whole bunch of kids is scaring me a little bit. But we love our kids, and this is an awesome event. The daycare kids participate as well, and we have a time where we preach the gospel to these kids, and it's an awesome event. So if you want to jump in and help out with that as well, we could use some extra help, especially during the overnight hours, just so we can get a little bit of shut-eye during the event. So there's a sign-up sheet for that as well, and we would love to have some help with that. And you would have an awesome opportunity as adults to be able to hang out with our kids, which is a really cool thing. Am I forgetting anything? I think that's it. So thank you, and I believe we have a couple more announcements.
Gee, Marcia, that's a huge purse. Why do you carry one that big?
Well, I have to because I'm a grandparent, and I have to be ready for anything with those grandkids, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
Look what all I have in here. Wow, look, let's look. Let's see. There's that. Well, that's for my indigestion. Never mind that. Oh, there's candy.
Candy?
You always have to be prepared with candy. And, yep. A container full of quarters, just in case we go to Chuck E. Cheese after church. You know, they'll want these quarters for games. Let's see what else I have in here. Oh, well, they're a little too old for these now. They must have been in there quite a while. We don't need those. Band-Aids, of course, you never know. Oh, and what if they lose a button during church? You have to be prepared with thread and needles, you know. But you know what? Honestly, my grandkids, they mean the world to me.
True.
And I would do anything for them. But, you know, it's a shame that grandparents aren't recognized for all that we do for our grandkids.
Well, funny you should say that. Next Sunday, we are going to honor grandparents, and after church, everyone, whether your grandkids are here or not, join us for a free Sunday. Make your own Sunday, and join us for a special treat. Of course, we want you to invite them to be with you so they can enjoy it too. But that's the way we're going to honor our grandparents that do so much.
Oh, and I think this morning the camp kids, the kids that are in there, are preparing something special for you grandparents.
Beware.
Definitely beware. Matt's in charge of them.
Got one more commercial, okay? And Kenny, go ahead.
Morning. How's everybody this morning? Do you have any clue all what I'm here for? Hey.
Healing. Healing.
Yeah, I need that too. Watch out. Again, it's coming up very quick, and we need volunteers. We got sign-ups in the foyer, but whatever you want to do, could be parking, judging, just any kind of help, and it goes so smoothly when we have plenty of help, like last year. It probably went the smoothest because we had probably the most volunteers. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time. The day goes pretty quick. We're normally out of here close to 2:30, 3 o'clock. And Dan's making breakfast. Is that right? You're doing breakfast?
Sure. We'll be donut holes and coffee, leftovers from the, no.
He's quite the connoisseur of that, isn't he?
Yeah.
But anyways, you can come in and have that. And we're gonna meet Friday evening to set up things so we don't have to do as much Saturday morning. So we're kind of prepared. So that'd be, what day would that be? The 21st evening. So if you want to come in and just help us, it's nothing real heavy or anything like that, just arranging things. But, the ladies or even the guys that can bake, we could use cookies. If you want to donate some beverages, Pepsi-Cola, Coca-Cola, whatever. But just you have a good time, and you don't have to work very hard. And it'd be over before you know it. So it's the 22nd. Well, we got less than a month. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you. Got a video I want you to notice, and then I want to share a few things about it.
It's couches and porches and kitchen tables. It's stories shared and moments worth remembering. It's hoping and praying and taking chances. It's jokes and laughter and shoulders to cry on. It's questions and answers and I don't knows. It's knowing you don't have to figure it all out by yourself. It's messy and imperfect. It's giving and serving and growing better together. It's life, and we weren't meant to do it alone. Life is better together.
In the back of your worship folder, there is a number of small groups that we are working on. And I just draw your attention to that and just ask you to consider being a part of one of the groups, not each of them, that'd be impossible, but there's phone numbers and there's information about those groups. Next Sunday, we're going to have our small group leaders to come and explain a little bit what they're doing in the small groups. But I just encourage you to be a part of these groups. Different times, different days of the week, different places, some here, some at homes, some just scattered all around the community. And so I just encourage you to take advantage of that, and it's a great time. Why don't you take your outline in your bulletin this morning and just encourage you to follow along as we get into the scriptures here this morning. It is good being together with you this morning, and I appreciate the worship team, their job, and everybody's activities and the announcements. There's a lot going on this time of the year, and we're trying to get everything all ready for the fall, and so I appreciate everybody's help and making things happen. Russ mentioned it. The missionaries. For those who don't know, we have a missionary home next door, and we have missionaries coming in for a time period. They raise their support, and then they go back out. And so Jeff and Barb will be with us. I think it's next week. They have a family commitment they needed to be a part of today, and so they'll be involved in our services at different times too. And so we're looking forward to having them here. A couple of weeks ago, Pam's nephew, Hugh, and his wife Stephanie were here visiting with us from South Georgia. They have two little children, and Jordan is about 4 years old, and Abby is about 9 months old, and they spent the week with us. That was about 2 weeks ago. During their time with us, they visited all the different things in the area. That they went to the Air Force Museum and the Kettering Water Park, and they just kind of made their rounds and stayed with us during the day. And one of those days, Pam took our grandson with them, Chase, and you've probably heard of Chase before, you know. And haven't heard of my grandson. That's you will now, okay? So, but anyway, she was taking care of him, and so that day they met at Cracker Barrel over in Bellbrook, and for lunch. And so, if you've walked through Cracker Barrel in a while, Eric took me over there for a big breakfast yesterday, and so we kind of waddled out after that, you know. But if you walk through Cracker Barrel, you can't go from one point to another. You got to go through the mirage of all these tables that want to sell you something. So Pam was making their way towards the restaurant part of the Cracker Barrel, and she had Chase. He was walking next to her, and Hugh and all them were ahead of her. I wasn't there, but they were just going over to the restaurant place. And on the way towards the door to go into the restaurant area, Chase had a meltdown. All at once, he just started bawling. He just started crying. Now, he's not quite 3 years old, and Pam had no idea what was going on, and so she picked him up and took him into the restaurant and wiped his tears away and tried to calm him down. And she asked, well, what's going on? Well, he didn't know how to express to her what was going on, but he was just really shook up. And even during the meal, he was clingy to her, and he was just crying, and finally she got him to quit crying, and he was really upset. Pam didn't have a clue what was going on. She was looking around, and, you know, those places, that store's crowded. So after the meal, she was walking back out, and Chase did it again. He just had a meltdown in the middle of the store, and he started crying, and he just fell apart and went limp. And Pam said, you know, she picked him up, and, you know, when someone's limp like that, they're heavy, you know, and so she's trying to wrestle him up. And she happened to notice over in one of the Halloween displays, there was a white ghost. And it's one of those mechanical ghosts that you put in the yard. And all at once, for no reason, it just comes alive. It's just a little piece of white sheet, and all at once, it comes alive. I've not seen it, okay? But Pam was saying the first time she walked through, she didn't realize what it was. But this white ghost, it just gets a body of its own. It's just I don't know how it does it, but it just comes together, and it's got red eyes, and it makes these creepy noises, you know. And there was Chase's problem. He was literally scared to death. I want to talk to you this morning about fear. And I want to talk to you about this it may be the most practical way I've ever talked to you in this whole area about fear. We live in a very fearful world. I don't need to tell you that. A few weeks ago when school started, you know, my first thought was, oh God, protect our schools from what? A shooter. That was my first thoughts. Lord, protect our school from a shooter. So we have those who have some really serious issues going on in this, and shooting up schools and restaurants and post offices and public buildings and things like that. It's the world we live in. You turn on the news, There's natural fears that sometimes just grip our hearts too. All over the country, there's a hurricane here, there's fires in California. Last night I was watching the news in Maryland. They was watching the floods as they was wiping out parts of the city, and people had lost their lives, and it was a real concern in Pennsylvania too. We live in a fearful world. We're not sure sometimes what to expect, and it just happens all the time. Every night in the news, there are some things that's going on that makes us fearful. I want to draw our attention to the book of Psalms this morning, and I want to talk to you about a man whose name was David. David was the king of Israel. David lived in a time that his world was a very fearful place also. There was a fear of the enemies on the outside of his city. Those times in that era, there was walls that would be built around a city, and so the kings would, at night, they would go and they would look out over their walls, and there was guards and there were those who would protect the city. David would walk out at night and he could see the campfires of his enemies who had camped outside of the gates, outside of the walls of the city. During the day, he could hear their horns. He could hear their marching. He knew that there was an enemy on the outside of the gates of his city. On the inside of the gates of the city, David had enemies also. There was a very common thing that if a king or a person in that type of position would have what's called a cupbearer. A cupbearer is someone who ate the same meal that you had, and they sat there close to you, and when they would bring your food to you, don't think about food right now because it's not that time to eat, okay? So don't get that in your mind. But when they would bring your meal to you, the first thing that would happen is you fed it to your cupbearer. That's what it was called. And a cupbearer would take a sip of tea, or I don't know if they had Coke or Pepsi back there. I don't know what they were drinking, or their food, And if the cupbearer, they would all watch the cupbearer. And if the cupbearer says, that's good, I want another bite of that, then everybody jumped in. But if the cupbearer all at once just kind of keeled over, then you knew that someone was trying to poison you. And that's the reason you would have a cupbearer. But David had a family member, his name was Absalom, that turned against him. He turned the kingdom against David. David internally in his family had problems. There was tension. At times he would run for his life. He lived in caves. He lived outside of the kingdom. But there was so much tension inside his world too. In fact, if you notice in Psalms, if you would, in verse chapter 27, and I don't know if you can get there or not, but in verse 11, if you don't need to, I'll just read it to you. This is what David said. He says, "Teach me how to live, O Lord. Lead me along the right path, for my enemies are waiting for me. Do not let me fall into their hands, for they accuse me of things I've never done. With every breath they threaten me with violence." And so David is talking about, he says, there are those who are saying lies about me. They are distorting the truth, and they're doing it in my kingdom. They're doing it in my family. And so here's the picture. David would look out on the walls at night of the city, and he would see the enemy in camps about him. He'd go into his palace, he'd go into his family, and he would hear the accusations and the lies. And everywhere he was, there was constant pressure, there was constant stress. He lived in a fearful, fearful world. Now notice what he says about this. Psalms 27 is probably one of my favorite passages of Scripture, Some of you who have had surgery before your surgery, I would read to you Psalms 27. Sometimes in your home, I know with Bob and others, I have read Psalms 27. I enjoy reading Psalms 27 because it's so helpful to us, especially at a time of need. So let's look at this. In Psalms 27 and verse 1, I'm going to kind of read through here, and then we're going to take some time and talk about it, okay? Psalms 27, verse 1. He says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Why should I be afraid? The Lord is my fortress, protecting me from danger. Why should I tremble? When evil people come to devour me, when my enemies and my foes attack me, they stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. Even if I'm attacked, I will remain confident. The one thing I ask of the Lord, the thing I seek the most, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections, meditating in his temple. For he will conceal me when trouble comes. He will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock. Then I will hold my head high above my enemies who surround me at his sanctuary. I will offer sacrifices, shouts of joy, singing, praising Lord with music. Hear me as I pray, O Lord. Be merciful, answer me. My heart has heard you say, come and talk with me. And my heart responds, Lord, I'm coming. Do not turn your back on me and do not reject your servant in anger. You have always been my helper. Don't leave me now. Don't abandon me, O God, of my salvation. Even if my father and my mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. Teach me how to live, O Lord. Lead me along the right path, for my enemies are waiting for me. Do not let me fall into their hands, for they accuse me of things I've never done. With every breath they threaten me with violence. Yet I'm confident I will see the Lord's goodness while I'm here in the land of the living. Wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave, courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. Now, in this passage of Scripture and this whole Psalms, and this is part of it is a song that David would sing to the Lord. Part of it was a prayer. But this is one of the neat things about Psalms is David just reveals his emotions and his feelings very, very strong. Most of the scriptures, you don't get the emotions of a person. But David does. He just kind of he just bears his heart, and you can hear and feel what's going on here. So let me share some things this morning about fear. What do we do? How can God use some very, very scary, difficult things for an opportunity for us? What is God up to in a fearful time? First of all, in your outline, you've got it, I'm sure, don't you? Okay, I heard that, okay. So first of all, he admitted his fears, okay. The first thing he did, he admitted his fears. He asked in verse 1, he asked the question, why should I be afraid? Why should I tremble? David admitted his emotions. There is something about a healthy emotional person is able to touch and identify what's going on within them. So David's not in denial. He understands he's got some problems. There's some issues that's going on. There's two types of fears. There's, first of all, a real fear. A real fear is when there is a tangible danger threat. When the sirens are going off, the tornado sirens are going off, and the sky is dark, and it's stormy, and the news have been saying there's possibility of tornadoes and all that stuff that goes together. And if you live in Xenia, Ohio, what do? You run, you hide, you pray, you go somewhere where you can protect yourself. There's real dangers. There's, in our world, David could see his enemies. He could see at night the fires in their camps. He heard their bugles during the day. He could watch them as they're marching around his city. I mean, there is some real tangible fears. And David lived that way. That was his life that he has. Some of you are living with some real fears. They're not going away. I want to come back and talk to you, though, a little bit about that. So there's the issue of real fears, something that is threatening, something that is potentially can be very, very hurtful. The second thing, though, is unreal fears. Unreal fears, they feel the same as a real fear. Unreal fears holds the same power over a person. It feels like there is a danger. It feels like there is a threat. It feels like something is seriously wrong. Unreal fears can hold us back. They can rob us. They act and they feel the same way as real fears, but they're unreal. For example, it has been said that there is over 700 phobias that have been identified. Some of us are claustrophobic. Any claustrophobics here? Kevin, I will not say, okay, how many times it took to get you through that tunnel. But I already said it, though, didn't I, I made a mistake one time. I was riding an elevator in a hospital. I don't know where it was, in Dayton, one of the hospitals. And all at once, the elevator started shaking and banging, And I made the mistake of saying, man, and it was full. There was a bunch of people in there, And I made the mistake of saying, man, I hope this thing doesn't get stuck. And man, did everybody turn and look at me like I was the enemy, And then I said, I'm sure it'll not get stuck. It's just had a little hiccup, And sure enough, the door finally opened. Guess who was the first one out the door? Fear, 700 type of phobias. Some are it feels just like fear. I think sometimes, perhaps some of the most common things that sometimes is fear of failure or fear of rejection and fear of embarrassment. And all of that sometimes can feel so big and so strong. And it has the grip of just getting a hold of us and just pulling us back, holding us back. And it robs us of what God many times wants to do in us and through us. Robs us of His ministry. Robs us of our potential. Robs us of things that He wants to do. Someone had said, fear is the dark room where negatives are developed. And that is so true. But both real and unreal fears need to be brought into the light. And that's what David is saying. Why should I be afraid? That is a good question. Why am I terrified? That is a great question. It is saying, what is going on in me that makes me want to pull back, maybe even from what others have said about me, and others want to say, wow, you ought to take the next step, you ought to do this, and yet the fear of just a rejection or failure or whatever, I'll never do it again, And so David, he identifies, he says, God, there's fear in me. There's fear in me. The second thing I want you to notice, he attacked his fears by desiring to be close with God. Now, notice what he says in verse 4. This is interesting. He says, the one thing I ask of the Lord. Now, well, let me read it and we'll go back. The one thing I seek the most, he even goes back and says, You know, this is the most important thing to me, okay? This is what's going on in my life that is so important, is to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, delighting in the Lord's perfections and meditating in his temple. Now, don't you think David would say, Lord, why don't you just get rid of that enemy on the outside of my walls? Boom, they're gone. Why don't you get rid of all the problems in my family? They're lying about me. They're ready to lynch me. Why don't you get rid of the issues that's causing me all my problems? You know what he said? He says, Lord, I want to live in your house. Now think about that for a minute. You know, I like you all on Sunday morning. But I don't think it would work if we all decided to move into 100 Grace Drive and all live together. You know, there probably is not, we got a nice facility and all of that, but after a while, this is not home, is it? You know, this is a nice place to come and worship and be involved in ministry and that sort of thing. But David says, Lord, I want to be in your presence. It's not coming and living in the house. The house in Jerusalem was the temple, and that's where David would go. That's the focal point in the Old Testament, to be in the Lord's presence, and they would come together for worship services many times. We as believers in the New Testament understand we're the temple of God. The Holy Spirit lives within us. And so what David was desiring, he says, Lord, I want your presence in my life. Now stay with me just for a second. Fear's all around him. Fear's on the outside. Fear's on the inside. Fear's everywhere David looked, there was a potential problem and someone was out to get his neck. He lived in constant stress, constant problem. And he's saying, God, I want to be in your presence. I need your presence in my life. I want to share a verse with you. It's in Psalms 16 in the King James Version. Says it better than any other version that there is. It says, let me find it here. It says, thou wilt shew me the path of life, or show me the path of life. And in thy presence is fullness of joy. At thy right hand there are pleasures forevermore. And so David is talking about in God's presence. Do you remember Moses when he was fearful to go to Pharaoh and deliver his children, or God's children, out of Egypt? God told him, he says, in fact, Moses said to God, he says, I won't go unless you go with me. I'm not going in there, Lord. I'm just not going to do it. Unless you come with me, it's not going to happen. David, what he's asking for is, God, I need you. I really need you, because in your presence is fullness of joy. And when I get close to you spiritually, fears just melt away. There's no place in my heart for the fullness of your presence, the fullness of your peace, and fears to dominate my mind. See, the focus is different, isn't it? The focus is, I want to be with you, versus looking at the fears and looking at all those potential problems and all the worst scenarios and all the different things that can happen. David is just pointed to God and says, God, I want to be in your presence because there's so much power there. There's so much of your peace is there, and fears just melt away. This is why my message on fear is a little different this morning. The fears didn't go away. The enemies were still there. Inside, outside, everything was still the same. Everything But what was changing was David on the inside. Notice the third thing there is God knows how to rescue the fearful. God knows how to, verse 5 and 6, this is neat what God says. It says, for he, referring to God, he will conceal me when there's trouble or trouble that comes. He will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock. Then I will hold my head above my enemies who surround me, and at his sanctuary I will offer sacrifices with shouts of joy, singing and praising the Lord with music. So notice in verse 5, if we could maybe go back there, it says, he will hide me in his sanctuary. He will place me out of reach on a high rock. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago that my Pam's nephew from Georgia had come up a couple of weeks and spent several days with us. Jordan's about, I think 3 or 4, I forget what I said, and Abby's about 9 months. And guess what Pam did before those kids came to visit our house? What do you do? What do you mothers, grandmas? Come on, some of you, Pam, what do you do when your grandkids are small? What do you put up? Everything, all right? So we got rid of the couch and sat on the floor, and you know, your valuables you take care of, don't you? Those things you don't want to get messed up, what do you do with them? You put them up. The things you want to hide, the things you want to take care of, the things you want to preserve, the things you want to keep. David says, boy, listen, are you with? In your presence is fullness. I want to be with you. And then he says, you're going to lift me high on a rock. You're going to lift me high in the midst of all this that goes on in the world that I'm living in. Wow, that's a neat experience. And when God was taking the children of Israel out of Egypt, one of the scriptures in the Old Testament, it says, and God just carried them out of that most difficult time. He just lifted them and carried them. Do you know how cherished you are to the Lord? Do you know how important you are to Him? When you're full of fear, you're full of yourself, and you're trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of this? And God says, hold on, hold on, hold on. You're important to me, and I'm going to lift you above your enemies. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to hide you on the rock. I'm going to put you in a place out of reach from all the stuff that's going on in your life. Aren't you thankful this morning for a God who loves you and cares for you? You don't have to go through this crazy, crazy world by yourself. It's not about how to make it through. It's about, man, if I can just hang in there, Lord, and aggressively just seek Him. Open your heart. Come to Him. Be yourself. Don't be somebody else. But just be honest with Him. God, I need you in my life in a big and a great way. Notice what else He says. He goes on from there. The fourth thing is prayer is how fear turns to faith. This is probably one of my favorite passages of Scripture in the Bible, at least in Psalms 27. Notice 27 verse 8. He says, my heart has heard you say, come and talk with me. And my heart responds, say those words with me. Lord, I'm a-coming. I'm a-coming. Now let's go back and let's pull that verse apart there just a little bit if we can. David heard God's voice. David felt his fears in his heart, but he heard and he felt God in his life at the same time. And he's responding to what God is trying to say in his heart. The fears are still there, But God is there in the midst of all of those scary scenarios and all of that crazy stuff that's still going on in David's life. And David is hearing God speak to him. He says, God is saying in his heart, I want you. I need you. I want you to talk to me. I want you to come to me. Not to, this is a rhetorical question, but are you comfortable in hearing God's voice in your heart? Are you comfortable allowing God to speak to you in your heart? Are you comfortable in allowing God to pull you into his presence? David says, I'm coming, Lord. I'm a-coming, Lord. I hear you. You're speaking. You're drawing. You're pulling. Would you notice in Philippians chapter 4, notice this passage of Scripture. It's another one of my favorites. It says in verse 6, don't worry about, say it with me. Wow. I remember Larry Grooms. This is one of Larry's favorite verses, Don't worry about anything. Instead, say it, pray about everything. Wow, that's it. David says, I hear my heart is saying, talk to me, come to me. David says, I can't handle these burdens by myself. I just cannot do it in my own strength. I cannot make it happen in my own abilities. That's a good day when we come to the end of ourselves and our heart responds to that small voice that pulls us and draws us into the Lord's presence. God is saying, David, I'm going to help you. And the way I'm going to help you is on the inside of you. I'm going to help you to rise above what's going on. The fifth thing, is the hardest thing to do when fearful is to wait. How many, and I know it's a crazy question, how many just love to stand in lines and wait? Wherever it is, whether it's a fast food or the bank or wherever you're at, and wait's not in our vocabulary. That's almost that's something we don't enjoy. Notice what David says here. Notice what he says in verse 14. He says, wait. Say the next word. Can you get it out? How's this go? Oh, you don't get there. Can you go to the verse there, verse 14 there? There we go. All right. Is that an oxymoron? Wait. Say it with me. Patiently. Wow. God's timetable is not your timetable, is it? It rarely is. Rarely is. I fall to that temptation too, and I say, God, here's my prayer, and God, this is a good way for you to answer my prayer and do it the way that I've kind of suggesting to you, and take care of it that way. How many have learned that God rarely does things the way you think he's going to do it? He rarely does things the way you got it figured out. You'd think you'd get it after a while, you know that? You'd think after a while, you'd just say, Lord, this time I'm going to wait on you, but I'm going to do it patiently because you're in control and I'm not in control and I can trust you and you're going to be with me. So notice, let me read the whole verse. Can we? So wait patiently for the Lord. Be brave and courageous. Yes, wait patiently for the Lord. Twice he said it. Now, do some of us need to hear it twice? Wait patiently for the Lord. Someone says courage is a fearful man who's made his prayers to the Lord. Prayer is what turns fearful hearts into courageous hearts. Now, let me make sure, and I'm nearly done, but let me make sure you understand. God did not come and remove the enemy encamped around the town. Did you hear me? God did not come and take care of all the liars and all the problems inside the camp. God could have. God didn't. God normally doesn't work that way, you know. But in the midst of all of this stuff going on, God pulled David to a certain place where David's heart was not consumed with fear. Whether it's a real fear or an unreal fear. Whether it's a situation where it's not good. The doctors have said it's not good. Your boss at work said it's not good. Family member says, you know, it's not good. It's something that's not, it's a real tangible place. But David says, I'm not going to live on that level. I'm going to rise above this. And it's a spiritual thing. It's what God does in us. And he gives us the wind of his spirit, wind of his presence, and he pulls us up. One more verse and I'm done. Notice in Psalms 34. Notice what he says in verse 4 through 6, if you would. He says, I sought the Lord, and he answered me. And he delivered me from what? All my fears. Can I say it again? Where was the enemies? Still there. Still there. Where were the liars? Still there. They hadn't gone anywhere. What changed? David changed. God did something in him, for him. So let me continue. He said, I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and he delivered me from what? Wow. It's a scary world you live in. It's a scary world we live in. It really is. We don't know what tomorrow, we don't know how things are going to work out. But that's not who we're called to be, are we? We're called to be the children of God, the family of God. And we have someone that we can rely on, someone who is stronger than the enemy, stronger than the things going on around us. Let me continue there in Psalms 34. Deliver me from my fears. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man called, the Lord heard him, and he saved him out of all of his troubles. Wow. What a neat privilege that God has given to us. I wonder this morning, maybe our prayer needs to be adjusted. God, if you just take care of this problem, then my life would be good. If you just take care of all these enemies that are all out there, and all these issues going on in my world, then life is good. Doesn't work that way, does it? That's not what God is saying. That's not what God's doing. God does his deepest work in my heart. God does his greatest work in your heart. And it's what he does. It's how he works. It's what he's doing. David says he can help me. He helps me to rise above all of those things. Chase is 2.5. If I took him through Cracker Barrel today, if I could get Eric to take me out to lunch like he did yesterday, we would go through Cracker Barrel, and if that ghostly thing would come alive, Chase would probably melt again, because he does not understand that that is operated by electric cord that you plug in, and it's just some kind of a mechanism that easily goes away. He doesn't comprehend that. It's beyond his abilities right now. But I do know what, and Pam said it, Chase grabbed a hold of her like a bear hug after she got him off the floor. And he clung to her, and Pam took him out of the danger. And can I tell you this morning, that's the kind of God that we have. He just gets up, he just grabs us and pulls us up. And the natural thing is we just grab a hold of him. God, I don't know where you're going, and I don't know what all this is about, but I just want to be in your presence, and I'm going to follow you. And that's the place where David said, he delivered me from all my fears. All of my fears. The Lord is my light and my salvation and my refuge. Verse 1. And he can deliver me. So here's this question this morning. Are you dealing with stuff you shouldn't be dealing with? Are you plagued with stuff in your heart and your mind? You shouldn't be there. How long do we wrestle with those things? David says, Lord, I hear your voice in my heart speaking to me. Come. That's what it said in verse 6 or 7, one of those verses there. David says, and my heart responded, Lord, I'm a-coming. I'm a-coming. That's where it happens, isn't it? That surrender in the heart, Lord.